Alright, welcome back. This is what if Deku was in Destiny, pretty much. This, let's say, check the link, or I don't even have a link, because my channel's not old enough to do that yet, so whatever. But pretty much check the link, or not the link, search up the name in archive for our own if you want to read it on your own. That's all I'm going to tell you. I'll put in the name, I'll put in the author this time too, so search it up on your own, have fun. This is going to be chapter 5 to 10. And let's do this.
Last time. Wisp, glad we took care of that fuckery. LSO Wisp, gets tossed into more fuckery. This time. Wisp discovers what is hunting them, Iron's remembrance nearly breaks the law, a new weapon is crafted, and freedom is best enjoyed with friends. Glad we took care of that fuckery. LSO Wisp, gets tossed because well. I do is keeping track of his resurrections, Wisp would have lost track of time quite a while back. As it stands though, that is not the case. They'll be trapped down in the dark. It's not that he's losing his mind, though he certainly feels himself slipping, it's just that he's sick and tired of the dark. Traveler and breathing fresh air. He yearns for his fire team, his friends, his family. He'd kill to escape this hell, but it appears that killing himself won't unlock those damn doors. 2 weeks into his stay, Jevril shared her name with him. It's not that he didn't expect Hive to have names, but he was still surprised. No homes, no families. Do Hive have families? No reason to humanize them. Learning that she had a name, ambitions, desires, and dreams had been a shock. To the point where he now questions if every Hive he killed was the same. As it make it harder for him to do what needs to be done in the future, but he can't help it. She'd opened his eyes to something new, and now he can't unlearn the truth. Jevril insists she's unique though. She says that's why she's down here in the dark, because she's different. Wisp believes her. Regardless, he can't help but consider the possibilities. The front of their small cave, one of his shotguns held in her hands. She watches the outside area for any movement, very aware of how exposed they are during this procedure. To survive, but she finds herself impressed by her companion. The sound of his pistol going off draws her attention, but she refuses to turn and look. But to keep Wisp healthy, it must be done. There's no food or water for humans to consume down in the pits. Survive off of unless they contain a worm. They discovered that the hard way prior to his first resurrection. But she'd been trapped down here longer than him, so it become easier to not lose track of time. It took 1 week for Wisp to die the first time, and every 2 days since, he has died again. Very nearly 3 Earth months if Wisp is to be believed. Jevril doesn't like what Wisp must do to survive, but he'd insisted that without food and water, this was their best bet at survival until they could escape. But it's to satiate their own bodily requirements, not the thing living within them. There's a bright flash of light as Wisp is brought back from his self-inflicted death, and in the distance something screeches. Jevril, pulling his own weapon out as he scans the darkness around them. Far off in the distance, he can see something moving. He'd yet to see what they actually are, Jevrel claiming that he won't like what he finds. Moving then. Shame they patched up your last escape hole. Jevrel nods and falls in behind him, protecting his flank as they make their way to one of their many scattered hovels. Be called that. Wisp carved it out of stone over many weeks. He used his light to dig into the stone and hollow it out, creating a large stone that could be pushed into the hole to protect them. The top, but after digging up, they ran into a ring of stone that eats the light. Next, they tried going around it, but once more they ran into the stone. A pity. She'd love to escape, and she knows the light-bearer dreams of freedom. They're thankfully not accosted on their way to their next home, where they'll stay for the following 2 days until Wisp needs to reset himself once more. Heading out to another small hovel. They never stay in the same place for long, and they always change the ones they use after each reset. The thing hunting them was waiting for them when Jevrel was scouting ahead. As they approach, Jevrel moves ahead to scout while Wisp looks around them, picking up small pieces of chitin to use as fuel for a fire. But light is light, and he'll take whatever he can get right now. He desperately wants to use SYLPHS light to illuminate their surroundings, but he knows that'll draw in more of the creatures around them. Hello. They approach their new home and step inside, Wisp taking a moment to shove a large rock into the doorway so nothing can follow them inside. While the other sleeps. Small blessings, he supposes. Jevrel. The acolyte looks to him, tilting her head. Last few months. It turns out Hive are quite expressive. He also learned that their eyes bleed into different shades of green depending on their moods. Of green, one he's come to understand means happy or content. Why are you in here? Her eyes turn a dark green, one he has learned to associate with anger, though he can tell by how she holds herself that she's not mad at him, just her circumstances. Being the main form of currency they have. Naturally, once he learned she was trustworthy, he'd also shared his arsenal with her, but there's only so many weapons he can lend, whereas their stories are near endless. One thing he taught her immediately was how to speak. Her English was surprisingly good, though he'd been horrified when she told him how she learned it. His fire team had interrupted, tasked with guiding guardians to their death. He'd been understandably angry, but after he cooled down, she'd explained that she never liked what she did. Hand to her head, running her fingers over the scar. Worm abandoned, killed self. Jevrel taps her chest. For more rituals. Wisp nods along, showing that he's listening to her as he tends to their fire. Wizard mother want kill, but ritual leader stay hand. You said you were born wrong. What does that mean? Not like death. No want kill. Tried save light bearer. Sure, she technically saved him since falling into the pit, but the idea of Hive trying to save the people they've sworn to kill. Wrap his mind around the idea of there being others like her. Do you know what they're doing with the light they corrupt? She gestures towards the door. Weapons too. He shivers as the words leave her mouth. That vile weapon that the Titan tried to use on Shaxx coming to mind. Corrupts when use. Lightbearer turned dark. Wisp had seen that too. Further interrogations of the Titan turned up nothing but his own madness. Throughout, Kaiden torn off and embedded into his weapons. He was trying to create more weapons of sorrow. About to ask more, but their conversation is interrupted by a tapping outside their door. Straight face, dash, dash, slash. It repeats, over and over as he and Jevrel stare at the door. Jevrel's eyes to her. The small light fascinates her. That's Morse code. She zips forward, ignoring Wisp's warning as she draws closer to the door. Turning to look at Wisp. Emmy. Wisp gasps and surges to his feet. Jevrel, what's out there? She looks down in shame, staring at her hands. If Hive could cry, he's certain she'd be crying right now. Corrupted Lightbearer. We are not leaving. At the Vanguard officer in charge of their base of operations. As soon as Wisp had gone over the edge, they'd sent out a distress signal to call in reinforcements. The operation as they fought their way back through the chambers in an attempt to find a way down. They'd secured the ritual chamber and turned it into a beachhead, reinforcing the entirety of the chambers behind them as fallback points. Maintain what they held. 6 months with no progress, no word, no nothing. More and more people began to give up hope of retrieving Wisp, and Ikora was called away by Zavala for another mission, something about Venus. To begin with, a sniveling coward who only gained his position through bribery. Why he was allowed in the Vanguard is beyond everyone working under him, but no one can find a reason to remove him, so here he stands. Speaking with Ikora about it. I gave you a direct order, Jenks. The man glares at her, crossing his arms over his chest. And he jumps, casting a fearful glance at it. They can hear the roar of an ogre, each bang of its massive hands against the door shaking the equipment around it. Position and we haven't found anything regarding Wisp. He's gone. It's time to move on. Jewel steps forward, hand on her sidearm. Stupid. If you'd been the one to fall, sir, he'd have done everything in his power to save you. Walking away from the group. I wasn't the one to fall, Inkit, and I've done everything I can. It's time to pack up and go. Packing the gear up and loading it onto carts. They can faintly hear the sounds of Vanguard ships docked outside. Active the last few weeks, and they've been making a lot of noise. Zarek growls and kicks a nearby box, knocking its contents onto the ground. There's a collective nod of agreement between them. Then we do this ourselves. Gather what you need and meet back here in 15 minutes. Anything they'll need. Their ghosts transmatting gear to their ships for storage to be called upon later. To set out, but they're stopped by a collection of frames blocking their path. You're not throwing your lives away to save one person. I'm not going to lose my job because you five won't listen to orders from me. He hands a tablet over to her and she glares down at it. I'm sorry to do this, Jenks. And he looks absolutely torn over what he's about to say. Immediately. Failure to comply will result in, at a minimum, time in a cell. Upon you and your team's release, you'll be banned from the Vanguard and the Crucible. Not the one issuing the order, Jenks. This is coming directly from Zavala. If I had my way, I'd be right there with you. Sarek rounds on one of the nearby frames, ripping it to shreds with his hands. To back away in fear and the hive to momentarily quiet down. I'm so sorry. The feed cuts and Jinx tosses the tablet to the ground. There would be nothing but paste on the ground. Now that that's out of the way, he doesn't get to finish his sentence, causing the man to double over in pain. Some of the people around him watch, but none move to help him. But Sarek tears that one apart too. Replacing both will come out of his pay, but he honestly doesn't care. Below, ignoring the man's cursing and promises of retribution. He runs off at Jinx's glare, still spouting nonsense as he disappears into another chamber. Transmat to their ships, preparing to return to the tower. Why the fuck? Wisp slams his improvised weapon down on the creature. For a minute before a harsh green light erupts from within, reanimating the corrupted guardian. He desperately wants to use a gun to make this both quick and painless, but doing so will attract the others scattered throughout the prison, and he doesn't think he can fight 7 at once. By his calculations, it's been well over a year since he fell into the pit and met Jevril. Single day. He can't even remember what food tastes like at this point. Clean air is just a conjuration of his imagination. And fuck do I need a shower. At least he'd gotten used to the stench, but that doesn't mean he enjoys the feel of filth on his body. Nothing else, that'd kill him in no time otherwise. Jevril, I can't kill it. The creature pants on the ground, staring up at him hungrily. And twisted than before. The first few times he saw her, she looked relatively normal, minus the black claws on her hands and the eerie green glow behind her eyes. Was anything to go off of. Now though? After putting her down close to 30 times, she's nothing but an overgrown husk covered in chitin and black tendrils. Last, to the point where doesn't even look like the awoken she once was. In fact, she looks like an amalgamation of hive and awoken. Trying their best to put her down. Combine that with when she uses her abilities, Wisp shivers, making her all the more terrifying, especially since even that has been warped. Yeah, I know. I'm fucking trying. She lunges forward and grabs onto his leg, trying to sink her teeth into his flesh. Wisp kicks her back and jumps away as she flares with corrupted light, the normally vibrant arc of the striker infused with putrid green and black. And gives chase, heavy, arc-laden footsteps echoing behind him. Putting everything he has into running, Wisp sprints as fast as he can, moving deeper and deeper into the darkness as he leaves the corrupted behind. Against a rock to catch his breath, hating every second he spends exposed. Once his breathing is more steady, he takes a roundabout way to their newest hovel, something they'd fortified to act as a proper castle of sorts. Self-made tunnels and underground passages so they don't need to expose themselves above ground anymore. And he's trying very hard to keep looking at the bright side. Sliding one of the many stone doors into place, Wisp makes his way into the living room, a relatively small room carved with a table, a fireplace at its center, and a few stone couches for them to lounge on. He spots Jevral coming in through another door, having escaped as well. This conversation many times of the last few months. He technically knows a way to kill them, but he's not willing to follow through. Come back from that. Sylph may have them hidden, but he can feel their pull, their corruption spreading out any time she lets Jevral look at them. Cleanse corrupted light. Balance scales. Jevral falls into one of the chairs, letting out a sigh and stretching her legs out. So, human. Imbue with light, like ritual leader imbued hive magic. Balance, yes. You want me to feed my light into one of the orbs? At her over the fireplace. She shrugs, scratching at her scar. Put in weapon. Not make sorrow, but something new. Something between. But can save too. Sylph appears before them and materializes one of the jars on the table along with a hand cannon. Bob's in place, looking between the two items before turning back to Wisp. It's clear what she wants him to do, but can he do what they're asking of him? They will keep come. Crave light. Need light. Will not stop until they consume. The whole reason they've been thrown in the pits to begin with is that the wizards couldn't control the corrupted and couldn't kill them. And kill them just as fast as they kill and devour guardians. The only difference though was that when they kill guardians, they grow stronger. Jevral says they don't have worms, so it shouldn't be possible, but the corruption of their light seems to feed on death in a similar fashion. But best hope. Wish to escape. Freedom calls, light bearer. He nods in understanding. However, the question still remains of how they'll escape after killing the corrupted. Get back and forth to study it. He opens the top and reaches into the jar, pulling the orb out with a gloved hand. And the scars on his chest and leg begin to burn. Sighing, he grabs his other glove in his teeth and pulls it off, exposing bare skin to the light cast off the orb. How do I do this, Sylph? Same way as you'd create a grenade, but keep the energy unfocused. A weapon of light won't kill and a weapon of dark won't save. Go very slowly. Nodding, he sets to work, a small white tendril moving from his exposed hand towards the orb. Pull taut, and Wisp can feel the orb trying to consume his light. There's a difference between feeding it and infusing it, and he's very glad that Sylph said to go slow, because this thing is hungry and it'd have consumed his light in an instant if he wasn't careful. Breaking the connection, and wraps the orb in a tight ball of light, ensuring it can't reach out to steal anything. And watches in wonder as the light begins to change colors. The sickly green slowly fades as he continues to imbue it, until it's resonating, giving off a clear pitch, and shining a soft green, much like the color of leaves or grass. And once more, the orb gives off a feeling of peace and comfort, but just behind it, he can feel the need for violence and the need to consume. On a knife's edge. SYLPH moves forward and scans it, noting the green and white tendrils snaking out to touch at its environment. Giggling softly at the feeling, Wisp tentatively reaches forward and touches the orb with his bare finger. He picks up the hand cannon SYLPH provided and looks for where to place the orb. On handle. Let it grow from there. Jevral points to the base of the hand cannon and he nods, pressing the orb against the handle. Light veins shooting out from where it connected. They expand further and further, encompassing the weapon in its entirety. As it was doing, and the veins sink into the gun, settling into place and leaving a beautiful and intricate design in their place. It's balanced perfectly and settles into his hand without issue. Wisp holds it out for SYLPH to inspect while Jevral leans forward and caresses it, humming to herself as she admires its beauty. Something new. Something powerful. May I? He hands the weapon over to her and watches as she flips and back and forth to properly inspect it. Might be called something else. Weapon of duality. Wisp shrugs as she hands it back. I suppose all we can do now is test it, but I need to sleep first. Jevral nods in understanding. Previously. Wisp, freeing the corrupted, I'd kill to see the sun. This time. The Vanguard has a discussion, Wisp and Jevral ask for better food, Akora pisses Wisp off, Iron's remembrance comes to a decision, Wisp learns something new in a high-stress situation, and a new mission is given. Wisp, freeing the corrupted, I'd kill to see the sun. This time. The Vanguard has a discussion, Wisp and Jevral ask for better food. My Destiny X MHA crossover is 5,438 words long, yeah. Well, we're technically all learning to accept Jevral, so I went with the next best thing. I think it came out alright and it stays in line with his character. His enemy will accept them, see Cabal and Crow. By the way, as I said before, dude is a loose cannon. I'm keeping with the theme here partially because it's funny to me, and partially because I know it'll bother Wisp every time it happens. The Iron Lord's at the start of his life, and now he's trying to escape that, but it just keeps following him. Smiley face. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Paradise. Y'all got any food? We're starving. The video feed shuts off and Zavala looks down at his hands, wondering how a guardian could stray so far from the light. But he killed a guardian, and all he'd said to defend himself was that she was corrupted. Further exploration through the tunnels revealed the prison where he'd been kept, and they found 6 more guardians, all with wounds matching the first. Rewinds the video and starts it again, watching as Wisp meets Jevral and the pair proceed to fight for their survival over the following year. Agrees with Zavala, and she's struggling not to go down to the holding cells and demand Wisp answer for his crimes, but on the other, she can clearly see the similarities between the corrupted guardians and the ogre that Team 1 fought. And it's likely because they're watching it from an outside perspective. It looks to me like he put them out of their misery. watching the two as they chew on his words. As much as she hates to admit it, Akora has to agree, at least a little. Were she in the same situation, would she have survived? Did. He killed 7 guardians and he gave the light from 6 of them to that hive. More than anything, watching Wisp create a new weapon of sorrow had been the thing to push Zavala over the edge. Guardians and stole their light. He's half tempted to take the weapon and turn it on Wisp for his crimes. Perhaps, Akora stands and makes her way towards the stairs leading down into the holding cells. Of the story? She's reaching and she knows it. Akora doesn't want Wisp to be the bad guy here, and yet they can't deny what he did. Or not is irrelevant. He murdered them. He doesn't even appear to be remorseful of his actions, and he refuses to let them near the hive, threatening anyone that so much as looks at it wrong. Well, may kill him. It's surprising to see Zavala so out of sorts, but she supposes it's understandable. It's something they'll need to do another time then. While they wait for Zavala to cool down. How's the food, Jevral? It's odd that they decided to shove them both into the same cell, but he's actually happy about that. To be separated now would be torture, especially since they're back in a prison. Much nicer than their last one, even comes with a decent view, but a prison nonetheless. Prefer if it was more. She pauses, tilting her head as she searches for the word. When it doesn't come to her, she waves to him. Claps her hands together in excitement, startling their guards. Yes. Aged guards. One of the men reluctantly turns around, wondering what the traitor wants. For a little bit before bringing it in for my friend here. The man snarls and turns back around, wondering what would happen to him if he just shot the traitor right now. Yeah, and his disgusting companion as well, is beyond him. There is no need to make our containment worse, Lightbearer. You're a guest of the city, whether it's as a free woman or in a cell, you still deserve to be accommodated, especially within the Tower of all places. Stopping at the window every so often to look out at the sun. He can't help but shiver at the warmth spreading across his face every time he does so. And my honored guest. He'd been irritated when they immediately pulled guns on them upon their arrival. Wisp understood, of course, nobody but him had ever spent time in a high prison and come back with a friend, but that doesn't mean he wasn't rightfully angry. Just as he saved hers. She deserves some type of respect for that, even if it's only given grudgingly. He wasn't just going to lay down and let them harm her, and he'd been quick to say as much. Squeak and the sound of metal footsteps descending marble stairs echoes around the room. Wisp makes his way to the bars, wrapping a hand around each while he waits for their visitor to appear. Katie. Akora's brow is creased as she comes into view, eyes moving between him and Jevral. Katie on the other hand seems completely calm and uncaring, offering a wave to both of them as he steps off the final step. Katie walks right up to the bars, ignoring the guards as he shoves his arms through to rest against them. He eyes Jevral with interest before looking back to Wisp. Wisp chuckles at Katie, always the most aloof of the vanguard. After Saladin and Shax, he thinks Katie may be his favorite. As well as one can be treated in a cell, I suppose. His bunk, and lays across it, looking up at Katie once he's settled. Jevral would like aged meat going forward if you don't mind. Whatever the emotion might be, Wisp can't tell. He only nods at the request. Other than that, can't really complain. Not fighting for survival, haven't had to kill myself, and that had been a surprise to them all. Days had been heart-wrenching to say the least. Overall, it's been a pleasant experience, though I'd definitely prefer to sleep in my own bed, and I'd have loved to get something set up for Jevral as well. Remain silent. Maybe he can poison their food during their next meal. What about y'all? Everything all right up there? Back. I do. Akora steps forward, hands clasped behind her back. The weapon you created. Where is it? Wisp holds out his hand and the weapon in question materializes in his hand. Pointing them into the cell, one at Wisp's head, the other at his chest. He laughs at their jumpiness. I'd like to study it. I'm sorry, Akora, but I can't let you do that. That weapon is dangerous, and I can't risk it being stolen during your studies. Stares at the ceiling. Once we've been let go, I'll happily let you study it within my lab, but it will never leave my lab. Looks to Jevral, scowling as she does so. You have questions? She scratches at her scar and looks to Wisp. He nods for her to continue. Fine. What are your intentions with the tower and the last city? She looks between both of them, and that makes Wisp sad. Since he came to it. Granted, it wasn't always direct, but he'd trained others to do it just as well. He sighs and stands, crossing his arms over his chest in the middle of the cell. Same as always, Akora. Jevral nods along before pointing to herself when she catches Wisp's eye. Jevral would like to serve too. Dash. Her name is Jevral, Akora. Wisp interrupts, glaring at the woman. She helped me escape, and she is now my guest. If you can't do that, you can leave. Akora turns and leaves without another word. Katie chuckles and turns as well. I'll make sure you're provided with proper food, Jevral. I'm willing to give you a chance. Please don't disappoint me. With that, he too walks out, leaving them alone with their guards once more. Wisp sighs and turns to look at her, raising an eyebrow. You can call me Wisp, Jevral. You've more than earned that right. Doom dash. We fought together, bled together, and killed together. Their guards flinch at the final one, tossing cautious looks over their shoulders at them. You have just as much a right to use my name as the rest of my fire team. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, you're an official member of Iron's remembrance. Willing to accept his kind words. Her eyes glow a soft white blue as she looks up, and he assumes she's trying to smile. Thank you. Closes his eyes, knowing Jevral will be there to watch his back. What do you think, Jenks? The group of 5 finds themselves seated in a secluded section of their favorite ramen shop, talking amongst themselves about the events of the last few weeks. Scrunched as she considers everything they've seen. From her very first interaction with Wisp to the very last, he has always been a kind and caring person, willing to see potential in anyone regardless of their status. Could defend the city should they choose to, all it takes is dedication and hard work. She'd been more upset that he said that to a child than what he was actually saying, but he claimed that everyone has dreams, regardless of age. Jenks. If that kid wants to serve the city one day, I want him to know he can. Light is just a tool. If I didn't have mine, I'd still be doing everything I can to defend these people. And she'd seen him at his best, but regardless of which instance, he was always willing to offer a hand to anyone willing to take it. Letting them escape if they dropped their weapons. At first she'd been confused and concerned, assuming he might be siding with the enemy, but he claimed that sometimes they're simply fighting to survive, and he's willing to overlook certain things because of that. The Hive, at least until he climbed out of the Hellmouth's prison. Not once since she met him had he ever expressed a desire to save them, though he'd never said he wants to destroy them either, so she supposes there's that. Desperately wants to understand, especially now. He'd seen her at her worst, her dead friend in her arms, and he'd not only saved her from death, he'd offered her a home. Turned her away. Wisp accepted her regardless of how broken she was over the loss of her friend, and he'd helped shape her into the hunter she is today, giving it his all to ensure she's as fit as possible to move forward with her life and defend not only the city, but her new family as well. Any of them would be sitting here right now, or anywhere else in the system for that matter. Wisp has trained hundreds of guardians, each worth their weight in gold. If he's willing to vouch for it, is she willing to overlook what she is and accept Wisp's word? Yes. I think we give them a chance. Their table. Some more reluctant than others, but they're willing to trust their leader. Wisp has never led them astray before. That doesn't mean it won't take time for them all to adjust. Jevral. It's been well over 3 weeks since they've been dumped into their cell and Wisp is growing. He opens his eyes, glaring up at the ceiling. Jevral. He doesn't receive an answer and he rolls over, looking to the cot across from him. In her place sits a calcified cocoon covered in chitin. Wisp climbs out of his cot and walks over to it, placing a hand against its smooth surface. And if he looks closely, he can see something moving inside. Prisoner. Wisp whips around, glaring at the guards that be gone out of their way to make his life hell. Now, their weapons are raised, both pointed at Jevral. He moves in front of their line of sight, blocking them with his body. They open the cell door and step inside. Legs out from under him, tossing his weapon out of the cell. He falls on the man, knee on his back, and glares up at the other guard. Hitting the door with a bang on his way out. Wisp sighs and stands up, pulling the guard to his feet and directing him towards his own cot. Things are about to get messy. The alarm blares, red lights flashing inside the room and Wisp growls. The sound of pounding feet rushing down the stairs greet him as he turns around, spotting Zavala sprinting down at full speed. Managed to trip. It's impressive. What do you think you're doing, Wisp? He demands, walking to the bars and throwing the door open. Looking between the guard now on his cot, Wisp, and the cocoon behind him. His eyes narrow and he takes a step forward, but Wisp matches it with one of his own, blocking his path. We can't let whatever that is hatch. That, he gestures behind him, is Jevral. You will not harm her. That is Hive you've been feeding light to. He takes another step forward, arc energy wreathing his body. The guard scrambles out the open door and Wisp tenses, taking another step forward to meet Zavala in the middle of his cell. Several more people come rushing down the stairs and Wisp spots Jinx among them. If you try anything, Zavala, I will fight back. But he begins to pool light into his palm, igniting it for all to see. Don't test me. The cocoon shudders and a piece of chitin rips off, falling to the floor. Zavala tries to move deeper into the room but Wisp puts a hand on his chest to hold him back. Don't. They can see the solar energy sparking around his body, the tassels of his robe beginning to float. Arm raised to deliver a devastating arc-enhanced punch. No. As Zavala's fist descends, a small purple dome appears around the cocoon, protecting it from his assault. Can't break through it, each punch cracking the ground around him but leaving the cocoon completely unharmed. He turns to glare at Wisp, who is looking between his hands and the dome in confusion. He grabs Zavala by the arm, tossing him back towards the bars. You try that again, Zavala, and I won't hesitate to put you down. Pointing his shotgun directly at Zavala. The cocoon shakes, and cracks spread out across its surface, a strange pale sludge leaking out from within. Air before finding the edge. Jevral begins to pull herself out, first her head, helmet still scarred, followed by the rest of her body. Allowing her to stand at her full height, now much taller than she'd been before. Zavala lunges forward again and Wisp pulls the trigger, taking out his legs. people rush into the already cramped room. Akora grabs Zavala and pulls him back while his ghost works to repair his legs, Katie stepping between the groups and holding up his hands to either side, a sign for everyone to calm down. He says, head turning back and forth as he studies both groups. Jinx walks into the cell and bypasses Katie, going to stand next to Wisp. Jewel and Hinkit only hesitating for a moment before they too join their team. Wisp gives them a soft smile before turning his attention back to everyone else. Something, but he can't risk turning around right now. Everyone get the fuck out of my cage. He lifts his shotgun and points it at the remaining people, his threat clear. To pull the trigger. Akora drags Zavala further out and the guards follow soon after. The only remaining people are Katie, Wisp, his fire team, and Jevral. Before walking to the cell's door and closing it, locking him inside with them. I'm trusting you, Wisp. He stations himself in front of the door, back to the outside, and watches in fascination as the dome continues to expand until it's covering the entire cell, stopping just outside the cell's door. Before turning his attention to Jevral, ignoring the quickly disintegrating cocoon behind her. Jevral. She looks at him and tilts her head, taking in the scene around her. He pauses and looks back at the cocoon. What were you doing? Hive that provide enough tithe can change. Thrall to acolyte, acolyte to knight or wizard. As they slowly expand, revealing a set of beautiful mostly pitch black wings that appear to be shining from within with thousands of stars. Structures move, shifting over her black wings. It's almost like he's staring into the night sky. Holy shit, Jevral. He assumes continues to pump into the wings, more colors begin to bloom across their surface. She has figurative galaxies on her wings and he can't look away. Scene. SYLPH floats over to Jevral and studies her, clicking happily to herself as she nudges one of the wings, causing Jevral to laugh. Not sure I'd change, but light provides, yes. The rest of her carapace begins to color in, matching Wisp's green, red, and black robes. So I choose to follow my friend. She bows her head to him, quickly lifting it when he walks closer. I'm more than happy to accept you, but know this, there is no need to pledge yourself to me or anyone else. There's a banging on the dome and Wisp spins around, spotting Zavala once more trying to break in. He sighs and walks over to Katie, Jevral floating behind him as she fans her wings. Katie nods to Jevral in greeting and studies her wings. He'll be the first to admit he did not expect the day to turn out like this. Defying Zavala? It's certainly been interesting, that's for sure. Katie, I'm ordering you to kill that thing. He leans against the bars, back to Zavala. He offers the gathered guardians a he hopes reassuring smile and gestures for Wisp to come closer. I wasn't expecting this, he whispers, gesturing at Jevral. Operations just in case things went sideways. Katie chuckles, trying to dispel the tension in the room. It doesn't work. YLPH accepts his incoming data transfer, frame widening in surprise at what she sees. A direct link to a transmat beacon on a ship in Earth's orbit. Ship as well. Codename, Wolf's Delight, controlled and piloted by frames owned by Katie and Shax. Take your friends and get out of here. I'll deal with Grumpy. With that, he gently pushes Wisp away and winks at him. Wisp scoffs and waits until SYLPH signals that the data has been transferred to everyone. Hand on Jevral's arm and they all transmat to the ship, leaving Katie behind in the empty cell. His dome disappears a moment later and Zavala's fist slams into the bars, denting and tearing them apart. Him forward. Explain yourself. Now. The group finds themselves standing on the bridge of Wolf's Delight. About without naming things. Wisp understands what he's going for, but his whole life doesn't revolve around the Iron Lords. But that's not the point. The frames around them continue to work, ignoring their newest passengers. Wisp spins around, inspecting their surroundings and smiles as his eyes land on Earth. Shuffling behind him draws his attention and he turns once more to inspect his fire team. Overall, everyone seems perfectly fine, though Sarek does keep casting cautious glances at Jevral. Hold it against any of them. It took him some time to get used to her presence as well. Well, he claps his hands and 5 pairs of eyes land on him. But he can't tell. Her eyes now hidden behind her helmet. That could have gone better. Hinket scoffs and Zarek begins to laugh. He says as he catches his breath, clutching at his stomach. Holy shit, Wisp. You're insane. Not only did you decide to befriend the Hive, no offense, Jevral Dash. Disobeyed a direct order and assaulted one of our leaders. As the shock passes, the rest of the group begins to laugh. It's not funny in the slightest, but the stress has been so high these last few days that it's all just. Smiles at them as they get themselves under control. Jevral shifts and her shoulders shake, though she's not making any noises. It appears even she is laughing at their situation. Laugh it up. Eventually they settle down, turning more serious. I'm assuming we won't be welcomed back into the city anytime soon, so I guess for now, let's claim our spaces. To gather their thoughts while they explore. There are 7 different living spaces. It's a bit of a squeeze for Jevral, but she's happy regardless. Ships, which follow at a set pace behind their new ship, to their new home, and they meet back up in the mess, which happens to be stocked with aged meat too, just for Jevral. Alright, so I'm sure there's a lot we need to discuss, and I'm assuming you all have question dash. Actually, Wisp, we all reviewed the footage. No questions I think, though if you don't mind, we'd all like to see it. Passing it to Jinx, who's sitting to his left. She gently takes it and inspects it for a moment before passing it on to Sarek, who hesitates only for a second before passing it to Jevral. She immediately returns it to Wisp, having already studied it. He turns to look at Jinx, raising an eyebrow. Did you absolutely have to kill them? The group shifts, uncomfortable with the current topic. All remember their fight with the corrupted, but hearing it directly from Wisp will ease their troubled thoughts. I didn't want to. He places his hands on the table, clasping them together. Shoulder, which he's immensely grateful for. We were down there for over a year, as you all know. They nod, recalling every little thing they tried to do to save him. But they were infected with the same thing that turned that ogre into that. Jinx and Sarek both shiver at the mention of that beast. And it couldn't fully control them. One of them kept telling us to kill her in Morse code. I wanted nothing more than to find a way to save them, but in the end, I did what I had to do to survive and ensure they wouldn't suffer any longer. Why didn't you take the light for yourself? Zarek asks, taking a sip of water. I had to feed small amounts of light into Jevral to keep her alive. Giving permission to continue. Her worm abandoned her because she didn't want to kill. She was dying, and I had a way that might save her. First few weeks, I decided to trust her. When I made the weapon, I realized that it takes and cleanses the light, but I didn't need nor want it. Attention to her. He refused to take after first. Said I should instead. To feed and maybe save so I'm not reliant. I disagreed, did not want to take, but he and Small Light insisted. Them to see a piece of her worm sticking through her chest. Worm calcified, filled with light. Realized I no longer need tithe to live. wings fluttering as she does so. Convince, and I take instead. Not light bearer, and not completely hive. She spreads her wings. Dance. Anything else? Wisp looks around the table, everyone shaking their heads. Alright then. Katie has a mission for us. Looks like we're going to Venus.
The reference, Katie is Cade, the fucking EXO, the horn, the man, the myth, legend, the actual only funny character in the Vanguard. So, and if you tell you any other shit, you wrong.
Light the way. Previously, Wisp escapes from prison.
This is chapter 7.
Again. This time, Wisp is called out for being a trouble magnet. He and his team discover a new race of aliens. Someone takes the time to explain things. He and Jevril create something, and Wisp meets a queen. Escapes from prison. Again. This time, Wisp is called out for being a trouble magnet. He and his team discover a new race of aliens. Someone takes the time to explain things. He and Jevril create something, and Wisp meets a queen. Best I can. LSOME shreds cannon to tiny pieces and sets them on fire. I scrapped the original chapter 7 because I hated how forced the conversation with Elsie, aka the EXO stranger, went, and I really didn't like it. Canon. I'll explain why in the end note. Also, I'm partially colorblind. So if I describe something with the wrong color, that's why. Lord 23, Joker Spectre, and Marjinx_Nox for helping me name not only the weapon, but also the class of weapon. Very well may end up being another weapon like the one Wisp created. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter 7, Time to Explain. Wisp absolutely should have expected the ambush. It'd been entirely too quiet their entire time on Venus. But the kind of quiet that everyone knows means trouble, and trouble it was. They've been surveying the area for quite some time, enjoying the sight of beautiful mountain ranges and large smokestacks created by the thermal vents and geysers scattered throughout the area. Beauty to them. Vegetation growing into and crisscrossing across the buildings, creating bridges of vines and flowers. The buildings and the plants holding it all together, it's safe to say it is absolutely beautiful. Something straight out of an apocalyptic novel, which, yeah, they completely understand how on the nose that is. Been like before the collapse. In a word, Venus is breathtaking. Which made the truth of the place all the worse. Fallen, and they'd just been lucky enough to never find them. For whatever reason, they actively avoided the area they'd been camped in, and until they'd ventured further out, they hadn't seen a single hint of anything other than themselves on the planet. On Venus. So imagine their surprise when they punch through the fallen blocking their path into an old academic building and the sight of strange, twisting, geometric, white lights greets them. Time. Sarek steps closer to one of the twisting lights, holding his hand, palm open, under one. There's a faint tingling across his skin as the lights brush past, a tangible weight to them. They continue to spread out, Wisp moving deeper into the complex while Sarek watches the lights flit back and forth. Zarek and Jinx had split off earlier to explore more of the building, and Hinkit and Jewel were floating around somewhere, though they're not quite sure where they disappeared off to. Team 2, all good. Jinx's voice comes over the comms, easing Wisp's budding anxiety. Team 3 accounted for. He can hear the strain in Jewel's voice. Especially with Wisp's disappearance fresh in all their minds. It's been 6 months, and they still hate to let him out of their sight, like he's some magnet for trouble. For a solid 5 minutes when they told him that. Surprisingly, Jevril had agreed with them, stating that Wisp had a penchant for attracting trouble, especially after he'd showed them all videos of his time prior to the city and his mission with the Iron Lords. Him troubled light, as if it was his fault bad things kept happening. Wisp felt bad for sharing the Shiva video with them since it should remain a secret, but he wanted them to finally understand why he was the way he was. Minus Jevril, but she's a strange one. Roger all. Stay safe. Wisp turns back to watch Sarek as he plays with the lights, moving from each one to look at their twisting shapes before moving to the next. Wisp ascends to the second floor and begins to browse through the surprisingly intact books scattered throughout. A lot of them are stamped with the same thing, Ishtar standing out in nearly every single one. Sylph appears before him and scans the book, clicking and beeping to herself as she runs a quick search. Finally, she turns to him, frame expanding and contracting as she condenses the knowledge. To study something called the Vex Ruins, she chirps, floating away to scan other books. What the hell are Vex? Here, static electricity running across the ground and through the air as the white lights expand, growing brighter and brighter with each passing second. Before the light explodes outward and something steps through. A metal creature with a single bright red eye staring directly at him. Behind glass in its abdomen just before it points its weapon at him and shoots. The shot clips his arm and he grunts, ducking behind cover as Sarek rushes forward and punches the metal frame, knocking it back. Glare on him, raising its weapon to shoot again, but Wisp leaps over the edge of the balcony and tackles it, knocking it to the ground. Firing wildly as he rolls it over and slams his hand cannon into the glass container, shattering it. The milky white substance drains out and the red eye dims, and then finally shuts off. To life. Y'all might have been right about me. He chuckles at Sarek, quickly placating the rest of his team. We're fine, just ran into something. On us. His order goes out just as more lights explode around them. He spots them on the balconies, the stairs leading out of the building, and the pathway behind him. Catches their affirmatives, but there's no time to reply as he's dragged out of the way of a large blast of purple plasma. I swear to the Traveler, Wisp. You safe? Sarek glares at the metal contraptions converging on them, eyeing the one in the back wearily. Than its brethren do, and around it floats a purple shield. In its hand, it holds a large blaster, which it continues to shoot in their direction, plasmas crashing into the pillar they're crouched behind, quickly eating away at it. Their cover, raising his shotgun and shooting the closest creature. It explodes, metal frame bending and fracturing as the white liquid drips to the floor. Rapidly firing as he ducks and dodges under their shots, moving from cover to cover and taking shots each time he peeks out. Fairly fast, leaving only the large one that rushes forward and slams its fist into the ground, catching Wisp's arm and knocking him back. Shatters, but everyone hears the groan over the comms. He can hear everyone beginning to panic, each rushing to reach them. He raises it and points it directly at the glass container, but the shot is absorbed by the purple shield. Cursing, he dives back behind cover, narrowly dodging the plasma aimed at his chest. Jevril calls out, watching the fight through the live feed thanks to Sylph. He nods to himself and pulls the light in his hand, channeling the void as best he can. To control it, but he manages to condense it together, forming a void grenade, which he tosses towards the thing. All explosions of void cascading out in a beautiful display. The shield breaks and Sarek immediately rushes it, slamming a fist into the glass. Out, the creature continuing to fire until it drains completely and it slumps over. The red eye powers down and it grinds to a halt, weapon poised to fire directly at Wisp. The arm crashes to its side. Grinding his teeth, he waits for Sylph to heal his arm while Sarek patrols the area, keeping an eye out for anything else. At the sound of footsteps, but lower them upon seeing Jewel and Hinkit rushing in. No more splitting up. Jewel says the moment she's close enough, glaring at him. After, saying much the same. I get it. Wisp says, cradling his now buzzing arm. He always feels weird after he's healed. Do a full reset, but he keeps that thought to himself. There's no telling how they'll take that. We'll worry about that later. He kicks the one that broke his arm, grumbling to himself as the pins and needles begins to dissipate. Wisp kneels and inspects the machine, noting the tubes running from the back of the glass chamber. Tracing it until it disappears into the machine. SYLPH materializes a glass vial in his hand and he scoops some of the white liquid out of the chamber before putting cap on the top, ensuring none leaks out. Studying the minuscule shifts within the liquid. Kind of looks like milk. Jinx snorts and Wisp tosses out a smile, chuckling to himself. Turns around, pulling out his hand cannon and pointing it at the person that it spoke. An exo, a woman based on the voice, stands at the top of the stairs looking down at them, her head tilted. No. There's no time. She shakes her head, eyeing the group. They're Vex, self-replicating cyber-organic robots. That one, she gestures towards the one closest to him. She watches him as he processes that information, white blue eyes shining with curiosity. I suppose it's only fair I answer your question since you answered mine, Wisp shrugs to himself, hawking the vial. Points to each member of his fire team, introducing them. Each gives a nod or small bow, though their eyes never leave her. Well met. Turning away as she talks in rushed whispers. He catches bits and pieces of what she's saying, but none of it makes any sense to him. Do you know of the Black Garden? He looks between his group, each one shrugging or shaking their heads. Absolutely nothing. The find themselves sat in the dining area, enjoying a nice meal while they traveled towards the reef, located within the asteroid belt to hopefully find some help from the Awoken. Beyond Wisp, but he's grateful she told them anything at all. Though, if he's being completely honest with himself, he's fairly certain she had no intention of sharing any information, but them being different through whatever her plan was off. Starting on the moon. He shakes his head. It's not important. Thinking of Elsie raises a question though. Well, many, but only two that Wisp considers important right now. In darkness. It covered her like a veil, permeating every part of her that SYLPH could see. SYLPH said she felt cold while secretly scanning the strange exo. He hadn't missed how she'd sometimes drop out of the conversation to speak with others, turning sideways and speaking his rushed whispers. Even heard the sounds of explosions at one point, but where that fight might be and with whom, he did not know, and that worried him. To see if they needed help, but something told him he wouldn't have been able to do anything for them, at least, not as he is now. And possibly even a way to save, if not wake, the traveler, so he'll take it? Wild goose chase or not. She seemed trustworthy enough, Wisp says, digging into another serving of stew. How much he eats. It gnaws at him constantly, and he wonders why it just won't go away. Granted, all she did was show up and info dump, but at least she pointed us in a direction. Flavor of the stew. He's not sure what ink it made it with, but it's delicious. The only issue I have is going in blind. We don't know who we're meeting or how they'll react to us. Are they a standalone group? Wisp shrugs, reaching for another bowl, but Jinx slaps his hand back, brow creased in worry. And pouts at his empty bowl. It's a shame. Jewel walks into the dining hall carrying an armload of snacks. She drops one next to Wisp and he happily digs into it. Jinx. She's glaring at Jewel for enabling Wisp, but it dies rather quickly at her words. She's not happy about the fact that the only awoken she knows are fellow guardians. What about Elsie? He finishes off his snack and stares hungrily at the stew. If I died with a full stomach, would I come back without the hunger? That thought away as fast as he can. I don't know enough about her to make a proper assessment. Hinkit shifts, replaying the video of their encounter with the strange exo woman. Screams danger other than her gun, which his ghost had been curious about. I suppose we'll find out when we get to wherever we're going. Wisp stands, turning to take his dishes to the sink to clean them. For now, let's just take some time to relax. Months and I don't need any of us cracking because we refuse to take a break. There are several nods of approval as each stands with their own dishes. I'm on the drying rack before leaving to find Jevril. He's interested to see what she has been working on. He finds her in one of their conference rooms that they'd converted into a study for her. Provided, Jevril is now too large to stay comfortably inside hers, so they're using it as a storage space instead. Finds her staring intently at strange runes that hurt his eyes to look at. Something he'd noticed since she started her work though is that he can look at them now without them inducing headaches, and when she speaks in the hive tongue, his ears don't hurt nearly as much. Did more to him than they originally thought. You wanted to show me something, Jevril. She turns to face him, floating over to pat him on the head, something she'd taken to quickly after observing Jewel doing it to Zarek. Later. Maybe once I'm done here I could swing by and talk with Jewel. Shrugging to himself, he steps further into the room, observing the strange and arcane things scattered about. He raises an eyebrow at her as she floats to the center of the room and begins to chant. At first, nothing happens, and he finds himself staring at empty space, but then there's a sound of something ripping, and in the air a black and green portal begins to expand. Portal, but this one shimmers with a warm emerald light at its center instead of their standard sickly green. She puts an arm through the portal and waves for him to do the same. And extends his arm until his finger is resting just next to its surface. He can feel waves of gentle energy pulsing off of it, warming him up to his elbow. It's nothing like a normal portal. The very few he has jumped through left him feeling cold and detached from his body. Wisp sticks his hand entirely through the portal and gasps at the warmth that continues to spread up his arm and to his shoulder. And disappears, leaving him alone in the room for only a moment before he too steps through. For a brief second, there's nothing but darkness around him, and he finds himself peacefully floating through it, but then something pulls. Jevril several feet ahead inspecting something. Wisp walks over to her, boots clicking on what appears to be a marble surface. And white veins intertwining together and spreading further out from each of them. Each step they take, the veins change and shift before settling again. He spins, looking around at their surroundings. They're standing on a giant slab of the marble. If he were to guess, he'd say it's roughly the size of a standard crucible arena. He can see, and the sky is a soft emerald green with black clouds floating across its surface. He can't find the sun, and he can feel the warmth permeating the area. In fact, it's quite pleasant. Powerful Hive can access a parallel plane of existence called the Ascendant Realm. Out with a single finger, watching in wonder as a small statue grows out of the ground. It's Wisp, back to her, blocking the Titans of Allah. Noting the scowl on Zavala's face. She huffs in happiness at Wisp's look of determination. She'd still been uncertain up until that point if Wisp was truly on her side. Leave it, but much like Zavala, she knew that Hive and Lightbearers had never once joined forces. Protecting her while she'd been in the cocoon had been the final piece she needed to know the truth. Grinning when he realizes what it is. Ascendant Realm is where powerful Hive build, homes of sort. A place of rest to gather themselves before or after hard battles, or even if they die. Fusion. If Hive is powerful enough, they become ascendant. The only way to kill powerful ascendant Hive is in their throne world. Currently occupying. So this is your throne world. Javril shakes her head. This is a result of your work. I may have made the portal, but this belongs to both you and I. I can make because of light given by you and through your gun. Himself nodding in understanding. Think of something and touch the ground. Focus on it and imagine it growing. Wisp kneels down, pressing his hand against the cool floor. Reading demonic blessing. For a moment, nothing happens, but then he feels the marble shift and watches as it grows out of the ground, creating exactly what he'd been thinking about. Humming to herself. Demonic blessing. He nods, the weapon he'd created appearing in his hand. It needed a name. Two prongs extending out to hold the weapon in place, displaying it for them to observe. He touches the marble again and imagines a pane of glass covering it, and a thin layer of material spreads around the pedestal before becoming clear, allowing them to see inside the container. Not of light or dark, and I agree. It's something in between. A weapon of harmony, a combination of forces. Not at war, but working together. Weapon, appreciating its craftsmanship. She knows Wisp didn't make the base of the gun, but his intent controlled how the orb interacted with the weapon. You, Javril. You might want to float back for the next part though. As he says this, he too moves backwards. Once they're a good distance away, he puts his hand on the ground again and a large building begins to expand from the ground. He imagines small balls of light illuminating the room and they appear on the walls, floating above the ground. They cast soft light across the entire room, and he nods in approval. Light lines extending across their surface. Javril recognizes them instantly. It's a story of their time in the pits, starting with Wisp's own battle prior to his fall and ending with their escape from the tower. He imagines a thick door at its entrance with a combination lock. It grows out of the ground and settles into place. With the image of Sylph, Wisp, and Javril all sat around the table, the combination lock between them all acting as the gun. Easily fit through, ensuring she wouldn't be inconvenienced should she need to access the room. Testing the door to make sure it works, he nods in approval at what he created. I didn't want to make something ugly here, especially for that. You intend to leave it here? She asks, floating around the vault to inspect it. Especially considering how little time they've spent in the Ascendant realm. Wisp is an incredibly fast learner. This space is ours, right? It won't go away and no one else can get in. Javril nods. Then yes. I can't risk demonic blessing falling into the wrong hands. That way you can access it when needed to study it and I know nobody will steal it. What if it is needed? We can retrieve it. Otherwise, I'd prefer if we kept it here. In fact, any dangerous things we come across should be stored here for now. Towards them and materializes the second jar containing the corrupted orb of light as well as the vial of Vex fluid. He steps back into the vault and creates two more pedestals, one he jokingly calls for now at least Vex milk and the other is simply corrupted light. As possible, raising a pane of glass between each one, ensuring they're contained within their own areas, unable to affect the things around them. Safe than sorry. If it's alright with you, I'd like to bring the others in here eventually. Can you make the portal permanent? So only they can access it? Javril hums as she considers the logistics, wondering what might be required. It'd be easy enough to keep it open, but preventing everyone but certain people from entering? In until I find a way. For now, Will close portal and open as needed. Would you like to learn how to do too? Is it possible for me? Not bad change, but the dark clings to you now, much like the exo. Different, but similar. Hive language does not hurt as much, yes. Having subtly observed him while she was performing the initial ritual. I feel something, but it's nothing like before. Watching as SYLPH zips back and forth. We'll need to learn to channel light into hive words. They have power, meaning. Empower with light and you create portal. So. Must return to ship. Approaching asteroid belt soon. The three make their way back towards the portal and walk or flow through it, returning to Jevrel's study. Staring at the portal as they return through it. There you are. She rushes forward and grabs Wisp's arm, pulling him out of the room. They're escorting us directly to the Queen's chambers. The Awoken have a queen. Apparently so. Jinx shrugs, seemingly now unbothered by her lack of knowledge concerning her own people. But right now, she's asking for you specifically, and our escort threatened to shoot us down if we deviate from our path. Meet a queen. Him only. The group stares at the woman pointing a sidearm at them, wondering if she realizes that none of them can actually stay dead. When they consider that, Wisp shrugs and steps off the ship, allowing the obnoxious amount of guards to close in around him. Marched off, completely uncaring of his circumstances. Reluctantly, the rest return inside. So, Wisp looks around, inspecting his guard detail. During his admittedly bad attempt at starting a conversation, they walk down rusted hallways of once thought-long abandoned derelict ships, and he can't help but admire the view through the windows as they pass them. Behind floating debris and Traveler knows what else, a bright pink and purple cloud shines down on the reef, casting it in beautiful hues. Eventually arrive at a locked bulkhead and the one leading them turns to inspect Wisp. He's not entirely sure what she's looking for, especially since he can keep his weapons hidden when required. Step forward, each putting a hand on Wisp to push him ahead. Grunting, he steps next to the woman and the door opens, revealing a large chamber decorated with crisscrossing wires, tapestries, and at its center, a rather obnoxious in his opinion throne. And with black hair, pale blue skin, and glowing yellow eyes. He looks like he's trying quite hard to act intimidating. Pretending to cough into his elbow. You should show respect. The man says, stepping away from the throne. He walks closer to Wisp and tilts his head, studying him. He flinches back and growls, the guards around Wisp shuffling nervously. Wisp pays them no mind, instead watching as a pair of fallen walk out from behind the throne brandishing their weapons. Offs. You're not the only one working with another species. You mean a hive? A woman's voice floats out from behind the throne. She steps into view, eyeing Wisp as she takes a seat. Silent. Did you know there is a bounty for you and your fire team, Wisp? She waves a hand and one of the fallen produces a tablet from within its pockets, handing it over to her. We're turning it around for him to inspect, gesturing for him to step closer. Wisp casually walks over, aware of the guards burning holes into his back with their gaze. Down at it, chuckling as he spots wanted by order of the Vanguard displayed across the top. Scrolling down, he spots pictures of his entire fire team, 250,000 glimmer bounties for each, and 1 million for him. But I thought you might like to know. There's no mention of Jevrel, just an unknown accomplice. Can't have it getting out that a guardian is working with a hive wizard, he thinks, handing the tablet back. He steps back to his previous spot. It seems you already know me, but allow me to introduce myself regardless. He bows, smirking at the man next to him as he does so. It's a pleasure to meet you, Interesting. Call me Mara. She hums to herself, gesturing to the man next to him. And Uldren, my brother. H appears over his shoulder. Tell me, Wisp, why have you come to the reef? We were told by an exo that you could help us locate the Black Garden. To his line of sight, glaring down at him from his spot on the stairs. Do you want with the Black Garden? Wisp shrugs, looking over Uldren's shoulder and raising an eyebrow at Mara. And he's taking great joy in the sound of Uldren grinding his teeth. Do you know where it is? How to get inside? Internally, Wisp sighs. He's trying incredibly hard not to say anything stupid to the men before him, and he feels like he's going to fail very soon. No, otherwise I would be out there hunting it instead of dealing with. Sylph bumps into his shoulder, drawing him from his thoughts. He sneers at the use of his name. There's something inside called the Black Heart. The exo, Elsie, told us we'd need to destroy it before the traveler can begin to heal. Ground. Not exactly what I said, but I suppose it's a fitting description. And why would we help you do dash? The queen requests counsel with her brother. Slowly walking back to speak with her. They talk in hushed voices, the queen occasionally casting a glance at Wisp before returning her attention back to her brother. To rest on, enjoying the familiar weight settling over his palm. She looks up at him and blinks her single eye, frame rotating around her as they share each other's company. Irritated, though he does a wonderful job of hiding it. Yes, Wisp looks back up, watching as Uldren grins and descends the stairs. All we'll need is the head of a Vex Gate Lord. He almost tells them he has some Vex milk but wisely chooses not to. I suppose we could get you one. This whole ordeal has to be so incredibly difficult. Why do you want a Vex head though? We don't, but it's your only hope of getting into the garden. Uldren waves a hand, dismissing them. Wisp sighs and turns around, allowing his guards to escort him back to his ship. They leave, making their way back towards Venus. What did you learn? Jinx asks. That this whole thing could have been done over holo video.
Alright, that's gonna